Hello everybody, welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well, and today we are doing a review of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, which, depending on how you count the Indiana Jones films, whether you actually acknowledge that Crystal Skull exists, or whether you even acknowledge that this film even exists, is the fifth movie in the Indiana Jones installment, or doesn't really ever exist whatsoever. And the fact that, of course, time travel has something to do with this movie, and that's not really spoiling much of anything because it's literally in the trailer and in the general plot synopsis with the Dial of Destiny itself. We're going to go ahead and dive into this review with, oh boy, okay, there's a lot of things to say about this movie, mostly mediocre. So not even mostly bad things to say about this movie, mostly mediocre things, but I think that ultimately becomes one of the biggest problems for this movie, especially when you have the name Indiana Jones attached to it. Mediocrity is not exactly what you would want, especially for what is essentially a swan song for this character and for the franchise, as well as many of the people involved. Before we go any further, though, please make sure to smash that like button, not that fire button, obviously, and smash the rumble button as well. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with the bell notification on. That way you know every video or live stream goes live on the channel. So, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, as it says right here, it's a legend will face his destiny, directed by James Mangold. For those that maybe had missed it, James Mangold's the one who kept making excuses for this movie, kept making excuses for the fact that this film really should not have ever been made because, I mean, let's be honest here, Harrison Ford is not really at the age where he should be doing these kinds of movies, and it's sad to say that for the most part that holds true in the movie. Every time that you see him on screen, trying to do these other things, trying to do these action sequences, you either can recognize very easily that there's a stunt double or that they're using some kind of deepfake CGI to put his face onto someone else's body, or that the scene is just so dark you can't even tell one way or the other. And ultimately what that leads to is just a very, very hollow portrayal of the actual character. You know, when we think of Indiana Jones, and I would consider myself to be kind of a generic fan of the franchise, I remember Raiders of the Lost Ark just really being fantastic, and I've seen it a few times, but my favorite of all time of the entire Indiana Jones franchise is still The Last Crusade, because there's a lot of religious elements in that movie that obviously I am much more drawn to. And those felt like Indiana Jones movies, right? There were certain feelings, there were certain prospects, there's certain identities that are attached to this character, are attached to what an Indiana Jones movie should be like. These are things that were completely missing, or at the very least were very much muddled by a film like Crystal Skull, and now including also Dial of Destiny. And that is ultimately, I think, the biggest problem this movie has. You're going to have a lot of people out there saying that it's Phoebe Waller-Bridge, she's destroyed the franchise, she's destroyed everything, and look, I'm not here to tell you that she was amazing in the movie, because she wasn't. And that, I think, is the biggest problem of all, is that you're going to have a lot of people focusing on this was crap and this was terrible and this was terrible. And again, there were some things in here that absolutely were bad. I still don't quite understand why people are actually speaking so highly of the first 20 minutes or so of the movie. Not because the section was bad, but because they kept kind of glossing over or saying, oh yeah, the CGI and the de-aging that they did on Harrison Ford, it looked fine. I'm here to say it didn't. It didn't look fine at all, because the biggest problem that any de-aging effect, that any CGI effect has when you are trying to, again, bring someone back from the dead, or in this case, trying to make someone appear younger, is that it's still digital. It's still a digital image, and if we've learned anything about digital imagery, it is soulless. And that's the biggest problem of all, is that even though you're like, oh, wait, that technology looks kind of cool, that technology actually makes him look very young. The issue is that because not only of the uncanny valley, but also because it is computer generated, computers do not have souls. Computer-generated imagery also does not therefore be able to portray the human soul that the actual human face can portray. So you have, in the instance of the very beginning of the movie, where they're back in time a little bit, again, kind of setting things up for the plot of this movie, you have a CGI de-aged Indiana Jones in Harrison Ford, but then you also have Toby Jones, who it looks clearly like he's been, again, looking like his normal self, because he's kind of trying to play the age that he actually is in real life. So maybe you've got some makeup on him in general, but in his performance, which is very minor and very small in the movie, you at the very least feel like, okay, I can feel the performance, I can feel exactly what's going through, I can almost, again, see the emotion and see the humanity in this character. But every time they cut over to the CGI face of a young Harrison Ford, it looks really bad. And I say it looks really bad not because of the visual effects, but because if I'm looking at a character and I can't see the soul and I cannot see the life behind the eyes and I cannot see the life behind the character, then what you're presenting then is just a caricature of Indiana Jones. So even in what many consider to be the best part of the movie, it lacks Indiana Jones. Because again, you can try and defend in your mind and say, but again, the visuals were there. It looked very much like a young Indiana Jones. It's amazing what they can do with this technology. But if you're not able to capture the soul, which again, no matter how far advanced they get, you're never going to be able to capture that, in my honest opinion, because there's something about the real human face. There's something about the human person itself, right, being made in the image and likeness of God that we can see in someone's performance that you're not going to be able to replicate with computer imagery. And so that kind of, I think, honestly set the tone for the entirety of the movie, because this entire film was mediocre. You know, it's not even that the film was, you know, for some people, they might say it's really good. I don't know exactly where those people would be coming from with that statement, but also to those that would say it's really bad, it's trash. Yes, it's trash if you are coming from the perspective that this is supposed to be an Indiana Jones movie, and it ends up just being a generic old man action movie. And again, if that is what makes it bad in your mind, I think that that's completely valid. But to say that the movie is trash, I think just, again, kind of disregards. The cinematography is mostly fine. The CGI and effects are mostly okay. They're workable, right? They make sense for what they are doing. The story makes sense. Much of the acting performances, when it's the actual real people giving the performances, are fine in the movie. Even when you look to someone like, and again, I'm not a big fan of hers whatsoever, but even when you look to someone like Phoebe Waller-Bridge, she's not like a terrible actress in this movie. The issue that comes around with her character is that she could have been played by anyone. The way in which that character of Helena was written, it wasn't written for Phoebe Waller-Bridge. It was literally just written as generic female protagonist, which means any actress could have stepped in. Whether they are well-trained or whether they're not trained at all, they could have stepped in and done the same thing and had the same effect. And that is, I think, again, kind of the running theme of this movie is that it's just there, it exists, it's generic, and that is where I think anyone involved with the project, whether it is upwards of the producers of this movie, or whether it's even with the director James Mangold, or the plethora of writers, I believe there was like 5 screenwriters that were ended up listing giving credit for this movie, you ultimately have to think, okay, yes, this is just a failure in so many different ways, because this is not an Indiana Jones movie. And so if you're a huge fan of the franchise and you're going into this expecting Indiana Jones, I can see why you would think that this movie sucks, why you hate this movie, all right? Why many people will hate this movie. But as someone who is a fan of the franchise to an extent, right, is not really a diehard fan of the franchise necessarily, again, kind of going into my own history in the very beginning of this review, I have to look at this and say, okay, like the technical elements, there are certain things that are there. This is competently made. This is a heck of a lot better than what happened in Crystal Skull. It just, again, felt like a much more competently made movie. The problem, though, is that even though the movie itself, from the outside, is competently made, doesn't make it an Indiana Jones movie. Generic, basic, bare bones, old man action series that happens to have a character named Indiana Jones does not make a good Indiana Jones or even a decent Indiana Jones movie. It makes a bad Indiana Jones movie, but a decent generic movie. Whereas with Crystal Skull, it's just a bad movie all around. It's not just a bad Indiana Jones movie, it's just also a bad film in general. And so, again, I think that's the kind of nuance, the kind of distinction that you may not see other people actually take. I think a lot of people are going to end up just hating on this movie, possibly just to hate on it, or they're going to be coming at it from someone who is a hardcore fan of the franchise, and so they're kind of, again, having those emotions that are coming out, and I totally understand why anyone would feel that way. But just, again, trying to come at this as objectively as I possibly can, I went in thinking I would hate Phoebe Waller-Bridge. And as an actress and as the performer of the role of Helena, I did not hate the character. It was more of a, oh, okay, Helena's on screen again, and this could have been played by anyone. I don't care about this character whatsoever. There's nothing, there's nothing that would make me want to be beholden to this character. I don't care when this character's on screen or off screen. And that to me is almost as bad, if not worse, than when it's a character that annoys you to the point where you just never want to see them again. Because at least in that case, you have an emotional attachment to the character, even if it's a negative, right? Just like that. When it comes to this one, it's like, oh, you're there. You're in the background. And so the fact that anyone like Kathleen Kennedy or anyone else would be even, play around with the idea of Phoebe Waller-Bridge coming back in some way to continue this franchise in some way, to me is one of the dumbest things they could ever do, because everything that we got from this movie was the character of Helena is completely pointless, does nothing for the movie. The performance of Phoebe Waller-Bridge is about as generic as you can get. And I think a lot of people are going to come out of this movie and just forget about it. I think that ultimately, even when you look to Crystal Skull, there are so many bad things in that movie that you still at least remember them. This is a movie that I honestly think most people are going to forget. I think it was even Jeremy Jahns who said that, yeah, this is a movie you're going to get in, T-minus 5 minutes, right? That this is just not going to be the film that's going to have any staying power. And that, I think, is ultimately what makes it even worse for the entirety of the franchise and for anyone going into this expecting an Indiana Jones movie. It should not be a just throwaway, forgettable, generic action movie. You expect to have something a little bit more than that. You expect when they're going through and saying, oh, we're figuring this out, right? We've seen this happen even with National Treasure, right? The first National Treasure, you had these characters figuring things out. Indiana Jones go to the classics, right? Oh, this piece goes here. This is leading us there. Okay, that can be fun. And this one, the way it plays out, you just don't even care about what's going on screen. And that ultimately leads to also all of these actors that are coming back and are being featured. It just makes you feel bad for them. John Rhys Davies is in a very small performance in the movie, and you're like, okay, you're trying, you're there for the nostalgia, but you're just not in a good enough movie for that to really have any impact whatsoever. Mads Mikkelsen, who plays the villain, hey, he shows up in every movie he does. He actually acts in every single movie he does. I will even say that Harrison Ford actually shows up for this movie. He's not phoning it in most of the time. However, with what he's being given in this movie, it just honestly comes across as just yet another generic performance from an older actor. So ultimately, I walk away from this movie thinking, okay, John Williams' score, it's good. John Williams, obviously, even as he's getting older, even as he's like semi-retired, I think this is supposed to be his last official movie, whatever it might be. I think that ultimately that is fine. Cinematography is fine, right? It's generic. You look at the visual effects, most of them are fine. There's also some that are just really, really bad. The fact that they spent almost $300 million on this movie makes no sense to me whatsoever. The film is way too long, and I don't mean that as just far as a general runtime. It's because the story is so generic. You think to yourself, okay, this sequence did not need to be in here. This sequence could have obviously been, a lot more neat, a lot more tightly bound. And that is one of the problems that a lot of these modern Hollywood films have, is because you have so many writers, so many cooks in the kitchen, you just end up having just generic crap thrown on the screen. And so James Mangold, I know that you've had issues with people being critical of the film, but I'm here to tell you, this is the reason why I honestly believe this movie is going to be a massive, gigantic flop. All right. Right now, the projections for the weekend are that it's going to make $140 million worldwide, with about 60 to 65 million maybe domestically. And again, I know there's different sites that are saying different things, but let's say it does hit that 140. Based on typical trends, that means this film might get to $400 to $450 million worldwide by the end of its run if it has standard average numbers. The fact that this movie is not special, the fact that this movie does not come across as an event movie, the fact that this movie comes across instead as just a generic action film that happens to feature certain actors claiming to have certain titles attached to them, is not going to be enough to move the needle. And so I think you're just going to see just generic numbers, and especially when you have other films set to come out over the coming weeks, people are going to be like, do I really want to waste my time on a movie that claims to be something that it's honestly not going to be, with the reviews that are coming out, not just from critics who are not even liking this movie, but audiences too, who I think are going to be very middling on it. Middling doesn't sell tickets. Middling does not move the needle. And so essentially what you're seeing from this movie, which probably needs to make roughly $700 to $800 to $900 million just to break even because of that massive budget, you're going to see yet another massive flop for Disney. And it's sad. It honestly is sad, because they could have done a good swan song for this character. But at this point in time, I honestly would not have even asked them to do this movie to give them a swan song, because guess what? Last Crusade would have been that perfect send-off. There's already so many great qualities, especially the ending of the movie, Riding Into the Sunset, that ends the character's franchise. They, of course, destroyed that by trying to bring it all back with Crystal Skull, and now this is their attempt to try to rectify the wrongs of Crystal Skull in some way, in some fashion, trying to bring on a director in James Mangold, who, again, He does a fine job, but this is not a Ford v Ferrari. This is not even a Logan. This is a movie where it's like, okay, generic action film of the week, next. And for an Indiana Jones movie, that is awful. If I had to give this film a grade, I'd go ahead and give it a C-, a middling grade for a middling movie. But if you're coming into this expecting an Indiana Jones movie, you're going to be a lot more harsh on it than I have been at this point in time. But what are y'all's thoughts? Have you seen Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny? It also doesn't help that many of the leaks and rumors that came out indeed turned out to be true. I will also say, don't worry about waiting to the end credits, because there is no post-credit scene, at least according to the site that I looked at when the credits were about to come up. I was looking at my watch several times throughout this movie because it is far too long. So you can see over on Metacritic, 57 is the grade right now. So a very middling score. And I suspect that that's what you're going to see, whether it be reviews, whether it just be general sentiments. It's going to be middling. And for a movie like this, especially for a movie that costs as much as this, you need a heck of a lot more than middling reviews and middling performances to not only make your money back, but also to have any sense and ability to be remembered. And unfortunately, this character, I will say, let's just go ahead and stick with Last Crusade being the last of the Indiana Jones movies still, because honestly, it is the last Indiana Jones film. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, that the fun I see, smash the rumble button. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my June Patreon, Subscribe Star, and Locals members at the Keeper, the Bifrost level and above. Starting off first with Patreon, Father Luca Illich, Heimir Irie Hymason, Garrett Searles, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Orange Hat Reviews, you can check it over at his YouTube channel, Orange Hat Reviews, Laura, the Modern Major General Story, Rosetta Allen, who you can check out at her YouTube channel of Eagle Rider, and Miss Martin Muses, who you can check out at her YouTube channel by the same name as well. Also to my Subscribe Star peeps, Matt317, check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Fast Reaction, The R, Mr. Roy, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK Man, who you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co. And lastly, to my Locals members, Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player, J.H. Schwalbach, and Robert Barnes, the amazing lawyer. And again, thank you all very much for being my supporters. If you want your name shout out at the end of every live stream and every video, check out the top link in the video description below. You also can get access to things like a giveaways channel where I give away Blu-rays, 4K steelbooks, all kinds of stuff every single, most weeks in the month. I try to give away something, or at the very least towards the end of the month, I will make it up with several giveaways. Basically, most people are guaranteed to walk away with something at the end of every single month. So if you want access to that, again, check out the top link in the video description below, as well as access to an exclusive podcast. This past month, I was actually able to record a great podcast with Michelle from Force of Light Entertainment. So you want access to that and also a plethora of other content, check out the link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.